Welcome back to I Want That Too, the podcast where Disney merch meets Disney history. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and as always, I'm joined by the lovely Lauren Hersey, who we're going to follow up now on a story from last week's show. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we have a ton to talk about today in this episode. But before we get into all of that, I did want to give our listeners an update on the Bath & Body Works Princess collection. So we talked about it in depth, so we don't need to recap that. But I did make it a point this week to actually get to the physical store to see the spread in person. And Jim, it was a Disney lover's dream. And I was not the only one that was completely losing it going into the store. Have you been to the mall or anything, seen anything about the in-person displays?
I have not. It's February in New England, Lauren. I'm either about to shoveling, or just finished shoveling. In fact, I'm sitting here waiting for the next snowstorms to start now. So getting to the mall, it's on my list for April, where in theory the snow will have melted. And I would imagine there will be all sorts of interesting smells, coming out of the snowdrifts when that happens. But anyway, back to the Princess scents.
Ooh, let's stay with Bath & Body smells.
There
we'll
we
leave
go.
your New
There
Hampshire smells with you. Okay, but when you walk in, at least at my local Bath & Body Works, there was a giant display front and center with, the castles. And I'm looking at the picture I took with the little birdies. It looks like from Snow White that says, "Step into your story." And this is where they made a big splash with the "Life is a Fairy Tale" scent. And that's where that backpack was, and the castle. We talked about the candle display and the light up sanitizer holder, all of that. That was there. And then each one of our new princesses got their own themed display with all of their merch. And so you kind of got to go display to display. And I wanted to pick up one of every scent so that I could kind of report back what the Hersey Roundtable had to say. But before I tell you what our ranking was for the scents, I did go to our favorite platform, Reddit, to see what the internet was saying about this year's collection, and I wanted to get their ranking. So for them, for the internet, the interwebs, Tiana seemed like the biggest fragrance of this collection, and then it was Aurora. People were thinking it was going to be more like the heavy, floral, rose scent, but it really wasn't. And I will say that was the feedback from our family too, that it was just a sweeter scent. And then you had kind of Rapunzel. Another thing that people online were saying that I also noticed this is kind of weird, Jim, is that the body care scents versus candles versus wallflowers, they're not all exactly the same. One of the scents, my family was this smells like puke. But in reality, if you smelled it as a body spray, it did not. But the wallflower, they said, smelled like puke. So that was a criticism that I was seeing. But for anybody that cares, for us, for the 5 new scents, that's all that I'm ranking because we know that Belle and Tiana were returning from last year. For us, Mulan was our top scent. And then Life is a Fairy Tale. For me personally, that was my favorite. I bought it as a candle. I bought it as a wallflower. I bought it as a hand soap and a spray. That's how much I liked it. And then Snow White, which was not just your traditional apple scent. It also had a very fresh scent with it. And then Aurora, and Rapunzel. So I guess my takes or my family's takes were slightly different than the rest of the internet, but we want to hear from you. If you tried the Bath & Body Works Princess line, let us know which ones you loved or if any smelled like puke. But on another note, like I said, we have a lot to get into. So today we're looking at how Disney is continuing to set the tone from their major Toy of the Year wins and their blockbuster strategy. We're looking at some new glow-up weddings and how you could get married at the Haunted Mansion, which is really exciting. And then a cult classic is turning 40, and they have a massive merch push happening. But before we get into all of that, Jim, why don't we thank our sponsor?
Absolutely. And this episode of I Want That Too is brought to you by our friends at unlockmagic.com, the go-to place for some of the best deals on theme park tickets. If a Disney or Universal trip is anywhere on your radar for 2026, Unlock Magic helps you lock in great ticket prices without the stress, all handled by people who really know the parks and how to save you money. So if you're starting to think, okay, this is the year we finally go, head to unlockmagic.com to grab the best ticket deals and make that future trip just a little bit more magical. Okay, so picking up on what you just said as part of our show opening, Disney Consumer Products. And in fact, I think we talked about Toy Fair International happening down in New York at the Javits Center this past week. So they won big at this year's event?
They did. And just a kind of reminder here, we had talked about the largest international toy fair in Nuremberg, Germany.
There we go.
But this is the largest toy fair in North America, right, Jim? And this is the one that you've visited several times.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of wild. It for lack of a better term, it's like peeking at your Christmas presents in February. I mean, for example, I had friends losing their minds this past week because one of the things that was on display down at the Javits Center was a brand new line of Muppet toys, Muppet action figures, and everybody was like, "Ooh, look at the likenesses!" And does this mean that the series is actually going to go forward after the Sabrina Carpenter thing? And so far, so good. That's looking promising there. But anyway, we were talking about Toy of the Year, that sort of thing going on, right?
Yeah. So major weekend for Disney, and so they took home 2 Toy of the Year awards. So the first one was the Doll of the Year, which was the American Girl doll Moana collection, and then the second one was the Plush Toy of the Year, which was the Disney Stitch Ultimate Stitch Interactive Feature Plus by Just Play. And we talked a lot about that on one of our shows. It was kind of crazy. Yeah, and you told us that you had like the original interactive Stitch, right?
I love a Stitch.
There we go. One more time.
What's your Muppet level?
And that's from
Mostly good today.
25 years old. Nancy and I adopted 2 brand new, they're not brand new cats. They're 8-year-old cats, but they're brand new to our house. There is Moose and Rocket. And they are wandering around the house now, getting used to their new surroundings. And this Stitch doll scares the hell out of them, because it keeps coming to life as they brush against it. And it's like, what's the deal with the blue thing? And it's like, never mind, have a cat treat, go lie down. But yes, they as you mentioned, last year when the live action Stitch was out in theaters, this Stitch, Ultimate Stitch Interactive Plush, just crazy amount of features.
Yeah. Okay. But so these Toy of the Year awards, they're not just like smoke and mirrors. So they actually like matter a lot to these manufacturers and retailers that are going to showcase what's coming, because when they win, essentially it's a signal to retailers that the products are like proven bets for shelf space and to get bigger orders. And then with this year, like they were tying it to this blockbuster season that is a big part of their strategy because they have a lot of movies coming up. And so they're hoping for stronger retail placement ahead of those because, I mean, tell me if I miss anything here, but we've got The Mandalorian and Grogu, so tons of Baby Yoda merch. Obviously, Toy Story 5 is coming out, and that official trailer just dropped, which got me really excited. I love that Woody is bald. And then we've got Moana, the live action reimagining. So we've got some like big like theatrical debuts coming up that like they're going to want to sell merch with.
Absolutely.
Right?
And let's not forget, of course, about Spider-Man Brand New Day, because, again, I understand, folks, that's a Sony Pictures release through Columbia, but it's Disney that actually puts the toys out there. So as far as Disney is concerned, that Sony Pictures release is just as important to Disney consumer products as the Mandalorian, Grogu, Toy Story 5, or this live-action version of Moana that's coming in July.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's going to be a lot of merch dropping. And like you mentioned, the Muppets, like I'm wondering, because Muppets are still kind of front and center with the Rock and Roller Coaster closing and that retheme happening. And I'm like you, hopeful that we're going to see more Muppets outside of the massive success of the Muppet Show that we just had. So I always like to, I'm trying to connect the dots with what Disney is rolling out to say like, well, what could be coming along with this.
All true. And beyond that, I don't suppose any interest in the future joining me for a trip to the Javits, to peeking at your Christmas presents early?
Heck yes. Let's put it on the calendar for next week. For next year. Like, I would love to do that. Maybe 1 year Germany. Who knows?
Oh, well, okay. Let me see if I can get my passport. Okay. So anyway, moving on now from, something that we maybe do in February of 2027 to the month of June, which is when a lot of folks decide to have weddings. So I'm not going to lie, Lauren, having a Disney fairy tale wedding at the Haunted Mansion in June, that seems kind of wrong. Like, what, October, November, something like that?
I mean, listen, Disney is celebrating all, like we already are celebrating Halloween in August. Why not June? And people love the Haunted Mansion all year long. So there is big wedding news coming out of Disney, like Jim said, with the Haunted Mansion. But did you know that it's actually the 35th anniversary of Disney fairy tale weddings and honeymoons? And weren't you one of the guys, like, you had a connection to, like, starting the Disney fairy tale weddings outside of Magic Kingdom, right?
Yes, we did.
So 35 years, does that timing line up for you?
It does. My daughter Alice is turning 34 this year. So yes, yes, and what Lauren is alluding to is Disney fairy tale weddings got started in 1991. And my ex and I, Michelle, we got married at a Disney World in January of 1993. But where this got interesting is that, we met with the folks, and this is back when Disney Fairy Tale Weddings were located in the Sun Bank building right across the street from what now is Disney Springs. And, we went and sat down with the nice lady there and explained to her that, we're adults. We don't want the carriage. We don't want Mickey and Minnie there. We do want to get, we come to the resort a lot, and we were thinking we'd like to get married here. And, but we don't want to do it in the parks. And the woman across from us in the desk was, well, where were you thinking? I said, well, come with us. And we took her in our car over to the beach club. And we walked her to a little courtyard off of the lobby, and we explained to her, well, this is what we're thinking. In this tiny little space here, we'd have like 30 guests, and just looking for something small and intimate for two adults. And the woman just sort of looked at us with this sort of crazed look and then pulled out her cell phone and said, "Get over here." And suddenly we're surrounded by all of these other people from Disney fairy tale weddings. And, they had never thought about doing Disney weddings for adults. And we literally became the prototype. And in fact, Lauren, I want to say, when we got married in January of 1993, we had like 30 guests and maybe 40 Disney staffers, attending and taking notes. And not long after that, Disney fairy tale weddings began offering brand new intimate adult weddings. And I really should have insisted on our cut of that.
Yeah, but I mean, that would that even tracks though with the Haunted Mansion.
It does.
And when we're talking about Haunted Mansion in the courtyard, we're talking about Disneyland. Just so that we're clear, because this is a venue in the courtyard that's 25 attendees. So it's extremely intimate. And wouldn't you think that would be more like adult centered?
Absolutely. And more to the point, you don't want to have to pay for your flower girl's therapy because, you're making her walk into the Haunted Mansion. But yeah, I mean, I have to admit, when I looked at the photo that you shared of the setup here in front of the Haunted Mansion, it's another intimate adult wedding. And like I said, I really should have insisted on a cut of that.
Yeah, and I wonder also if they're trying to recoup their return on investment for remodeling or retheming that courtyard experience. And maybe they had this in mind all along. I don't know.
That could well be. I mean, they did create a super deluxe extended queue, which, by the way, took some of the heat off of the frontmost entrance of the park. But that said, I couldn't help but notice, where they've took the photo of this is sort of right in front of the classic mansion, but isn't just to the right there where, what is it, the carriage house where the Madame Leota shop is now located?
Yeah. Oh, we have to check that out when we're there.
Okay.
But anyway, so if you're interested in the Haunted Mansion or any other Disney venue, something you need for our ladies is you need a dress. And so the news this week around Disney fairy tale weddings was their 35th anniversary light up gown. Actually, there were 2 gowns released as a part of the anniversary celebration, along with the 2026 gowns. But the one that was all over social media and hitting my feeds was this light up gown. So it is what I'm saying. There are 500 lights woven into this gown. And of those lights, there are 35 different lighting settings representing each year of the Disney's fairy tale weddings. And so you think about it this way, if you wanted a different light pattern walking down the aisle versus, coming into the reception or your first dance. I mean, you could have 35 different moments with this. And what I think is kind of crazy is that it has this technology that is audio activated and beat detection. So it can, the lights can go to the beat of the music, say at the reception, just like the mini ears when they're doing the fireworks display at the parks, or, now with the new magic bands, they have that same technology. What do you think about that being in a wedding dress.
I'm not going to lie. There's a part of me that thinks that, if Disney really wants to promote this thing, why don't they put a couple of cast members in these dresses in the nighttime parade at the Magic Kingdom? Gotta be some people who are considering having Disney weddings turning out for the parade and like, ooh, what's that dress? It's a wedding dress. Oh my God, could probably sell a dress at parade, and these things would pay for themselves. But really, 35 different lighting patterns, and they respond to audio. Wow.
It is something else. And I saw, I don't know what they were doing, and I didn't have enough time to dig fully into it. But I'm thinking that they were releasing the 2026 line at the Magic Kingdom in a fashion show. And I think that's where I saw a lot of the pictures. So they did debut it at night. But if the lighted fairy tale gown is a little bit much for you and you want something maybe a little more simple, but still taking advantage of the anniversary, there is a really, really beautiful, classy Belle-inspired dress. And, in the current line of wedding dresses, every princess is represented. There's even quite a few villains that are represented, but this one is special. It's a gold-toned fabric, and it looks more like what we know Belle to wear in that iconic ballroom scene with her and the Beast in the library. And so this is something also to check out. Now these are exclusive to companies that are selling the Disney fairy tale wedding line of dresses. They have sizes 0 to 30. So if that is you, I encourage you to check it out. Or if you're just curious, you can just Google Disney Fairy Tale Weddings 35th anniversary, and you'll get to see both of the dresses.
And by the way, since we're talking about the anniversaries, and you were just talking about Beauty and the Beast, this November, 35th anniversary also for that hand-drawn animated film, the very first ever to be nominated for a Best Picture Oscar.
Oh, that connected the dots beautifully. And I mean, speaking of anniversaries, Jim is going to do his whole feature today on the Labyrinth. I feel like we're just landing this plane. We're delivering for my husband because last week you did a feature on that 1988 town square set from Sears. And this week you're going to be talking about one of his favorite movies. But the Labyrinth is celebrating 40 years. And I mean, this ties to the Muppets, right?
It does. In fact, we will talk about on the the feature portion of today's show. Once upon a time, when Disney was initially going to acquire the Jim Henson Company, and this is when the deal was announced in late August of '89. Lauren, it was the entire film library and all of the characters, so that Disney would have owned Labyrinth as early as carry the 2, drop the 4. What is that? 36 years ago? 37?
But they don't. So the Jim Henson Company still owns the Labyrinth?
We will get into why
they
held that back.
I don't want to spoil.
But let's talk about what they've got in the works for this coming year, the 40th anniversary of that film, which, by the way, again, was first released to theaters June of 1986.
Yes, and if you're not familiar with the Labyrinth, it's the one that was starring David Bowie as the Goblin King and Jennifer Connelly as Sarah. And to me, it is a cult favorite, I guess, but also it was one of those movies when Eric and I started dating at 16 that he was making me watch, because I think he had it on video. So it was one of the 3 movies we watched over and over and over again. But the reason this came up, and I was like, Jim, you got any Labyrinth stories, is because I was on Instagram and I saw saw these tennis shoes and I like sent them to Eric and I'm like, could these even be real? And he said he believed they were, so I did a deep dive. And so the line is from a company called Bull Airs, and there are 6 pairs of shoes. And if you wanted to get all 6 pairs of shoes, they're selling a bundle for $1,300, but you don't need to get them all. So there are the Goblin King sneakers, and these are high top. So if you're a David Bowie lover, there's Hoggle Toros. These ones are low tops. Sarah are the Stampedes. They're also low tops. Is this Elo? What does that mean? Elo worm short horns?
Okay. Do you remember in the movie where Sarah has just entered the labyrinth and there's this teeny tiny worm that tells her, "Oh, don't go that way." And she's like, "Oh, thank you." And then Sarah walks off into the labyrinth, and the worm says, "Ooh, that was close." If she'd gone that way, she would have gone straight to the goblin's castle.
So the worm got a pair of shoes?
The worm got a pair of shoes, and he's called Elo because that's what he says to Sarah. Hello.
Oh, hello.
Hello.
Okay, then talk about Fire Eyes.
All right. The fiery, if you remember the fiery characters from Labyrinth, the ones that could literally pull their heads off and bounce them around. That's an interesting pair of shoes there. The steers, the slip-ons, is that right?
Do you see them? They actually look like a Muppet.
They do.
Like
they do.
Got, like full-on Muppet hair.
Yeah. Again, very, very fuzzy. I think the phrase high maintenance comes immediately to mind, but they are cool looking.
Yeah. And then the last one was Ludo.
Yeah.
Remind us what Ludo is.
Ludo was the giant troll character, the red fur, big horns. He's the one who could talk to rocks. A quick side note, Nancy and my very good friend Diane Ginnard had a lovely dog, a blue tick hound for years, that was the size of a pony called Ludo, and we miss him very much. He was very sweet.
So the whole Labyrinth episode today is because I saw these ridiculous shoes. I mean, they're really cool for any Labyrinth fans, but it's not just the apparel and the shoes as a part of this. Jim, did you see they're doing a Jim Henson's Labyrinth in concert, which is like a 60-city tour?
Yeah, starting in the UK and then eventually coming stateside this fall. Is that correct?
Yeah, and they're actually going to be in Harrisburg and Munhall, PA, which is not far from me. And so maybe, who knows, Erica's birthday in October.
Oh, you got it.
So I thought that was really, really cool. And I think they're showing like the original movie as well, like with that like concert tour. So I was looking into that, and then I already did see that they've started doing like anniversary screenings of the original movie. So there's a lot going on.
I wanted to point that out. We actually, kind of interesting, Fathom did a 40th anniversary screening of Labyrinth in January 8th of this year.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah, so a little early. I wonder if that was part of the deal that they got to do it first so the concert tour could then start in the States come September.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And what I'm most interested to see, Jim, is I don't know if you saw this Bitbot Media, but it says Bitbot Media is creating latex masks and props based on the characters from the film. They've not released them yet, but I'm dying to see what these will look like.
Okay. I just remember the mass ball from this thing. Some pretty creepy stuff.
The website is just a list. Like, they don't give you pictures or anything yet. But there's a lot coming. There's, books, there's puzzles, there's games, there's advent calendars. So, like, we'll have to keep you updated as these come out. But after the break, Jim, you're going to go into Labyrinth Labyrinth. Can we give people a little tease what's coming up?
What's so bizarre about this story is Labyrinth, in very much like the Dark Crystal, is so beloved today, but Jim Henson, in fact, one of the reasons that the Disney company was given the opportunity to acquire the Henson Company in '89 was because Jim Henson was so despondent about how poorly Labyrinth performed at the box office in 1986. But we'll get to that part of the story in a sec. But first, this. And we're back. Okay, again, just to recap here, Lauren reached out when we were readying this week's I Want That Too and mentioned this whole Labyrinth 40th anniversary thing that's coming up and wanted to know if there were any ties to the Disney company, because, again, that's what we do here at I Want That Too. And yes, it turns out, again, the Disney company was supposed to acquire, initially announced in August of 1989, they were going to acquire the Jim Henson Company for $150 million. But as part of that deal, Lauren, they were going to get the entire Henson film and television catalog, which obviously included the original Muppet Show that aired in syndication in the 1970s. Then there was Fraggle Rock, the series that aired on HBO in the 1980s. And then the 3 Muppet movies that had been produced up until that time. The original Muppet movie from June of 79, The Great Muppet Caper from June 81, and then The Muppets Take Manhattan, that was released in July of 84, and not to mention The Dark Crystal, which went out into theaters December of 82, and of course, we were just talking about Labyrinth, and that originally debuted in theaters June of 86. Little side note here, Lauren, this also would have included Sesame Street Presents Follow That Bird, which movie that had been released to theaters in August of 85, and also the Sesame Street TV series, which the Jim Henson Company at that time co-owned with the Children's Television Workshop. And they had been partners on that since the 1960s. And that was a really interesting aspect of the Disney acquisition deal, Lauren, that, Disney was now going to have a chunk of Sesame Street. And, that was something Disney's lawyers were going to spend a couple of years sorting out. But we'll get to that part of the story later. Anyway, what excited then Disney CEO Michael Eisner the most about this acquisition? Well, 2 things. One was that he was going to have the Muppets, a beloved set of characters, to build brand new ride shows and attractions around at the Disney parks. But more to the point, Disney was then going to have the exclusive rights to Jim Henson's creative services for the next 15 years. And just so you know, Lauren, right after this deal got announced, Henson got right to work on his very first project for Disney, which was a pilot for a new TV series for the Disney Channel called The Little Mermaid's Island. Would have been a half-hour-long live-action television series for kids that mixed live actors and puppets. And the irony is, it was going to be based on the Little Mermaid hadn't even been released to theaters yet. It wouldn't come out till November of that same year, 89. But here's Henson already working on a TV series. And by the way, Lauren, you can see both of the pilots that were shot for this thing on YouTube. Just go there and plug in The Little Mermaid's Island, and these shows will pop up.
I'm going to have to do that.
Okay, so anyway, now for Jim Henson, at least initially, what was important about the Disney acquisition deal, that again, this one in 89, was going to take an enormous weight off his shoulders. For the past 4 years, it had been an especially brutal time for his company, with various Henson-produced TV shows and movies failing to connect with the general public. To be specific, I'm talking about the Jim Henson Hour. This was a TV series for NBC, debuted with great fanfare in April of 89, only to be canceled Lauren, 5 episodes in to its first season because people just weren't tuning in. And then something I alluded to back in the news portion of today's show. What really shook Jim was the Labyrinth's failure at the box office some 3 years earlier. This very ambitious fantasy film, which had been released at theaters by TriStar Pictures and cost $25 million to make, had only sold $12 million worth of tickets in North America.
Ooh, that's problematic.
Well, it is. Now, overseas, on the other hand, entirely different story. Filmgoers in Japan flat out loved Labyrinth. They sold $9 million worth of tickets in that country alone. Same sort of thing happened in the UK. For the 86 holiday season, they sold $4.5 million worth of tickets just there in Great Britain. Did really well in Spain, Bolivia, Venezuela, which is why when you add in the overseas ticket sales, Labyrinth's worldwide box office eventually rose to $34 million. But as we've talked about on this podcast, Hollywood, the way Hollywood math works, you got to make 3 times your production costs before the studio that made your movie finally start to see some profits. So in Labyrinth's case, that's $75 million. And this Jim Henson movie stalled out less than half of that amount at the worldwide box office. And you also have to remember in the 80s and the 90s, Lauren, this was the time when Hollywood's legacy studios, filmmaking operations like Columbia and Universal, and by the way, those two companies, Universal was founded in 1912 and Columbia was founded in 1924. So they've been around for decades, but they're now being snatched up by giant corporations like Matsushita and Coca-Cola. And the owners of the new owners of these studios, they aren't interested in making groundbreaking original motion pictures. They want to make movies that make money. And remember, in the heady days of the mid to late 1970s, everything he touched seemed to turn to gold. And he's now experiencing kind of a cold streak. And this puts Jim in a tough spot because he needs studios like Columbia. I mean, for example, Columbia would eventually go on to underwrite the production of 2 Muppet-based projects. Muppet from Space, that was released to theaters in July of 1999. And by the way, that features a cameo by James Van Der Beek, who everybody is talking about. We lost him to colon rectal cancer relatively recently. And then there was The Adventures of Elmo and Grouchland, which Columbia sends out into theaters 10 weeks after Muppets from Space, October of 99. And Universal, that was the movie studio that handled the North American distribution of The Dark Crystal, but they also did the same thing for The Great Muppet Caper. And what was interesting is they also, for a time before Disney got involved here, also had the rights to re-release to theaters both the original Muppet movie and The Great Muppet Caper. Okay, folks, so Lauren and I were just talking about Jim Henson's Labyrinth, and I have to ask Lauren, did in your early days of dating your husband, did he force you to watch The Dark Crystal as well?
Nope, he must not have that one on DVD.
All right, well, you dodged a bullet. Because, again, what was interesting about The Dark Crystal, with also, again, underperformed at the box office in the late 82, early 83, is that, the thinking was Dark Crystal didn't have a single human character in it for the audience to identify with, to root for. So that's why the story of Labyrinth was then built around 16-year-old Sarah, who wishes that her infant half-brother Toby be taken away by goblins, which then actually happens. And then Sarah, in order to rescue her sibling, is given 13 hours to cross the labyrinth and reach the castle of Jareth the Goblin King. This bringing back anything to you, Laura?
Oh, it's all ringing a bell.
Okay. So now the thinking was, going into production of Labyrinth, that building the story around a 16-year-old girl it's like, okay, it now has emotional stakes. I mean, there's an innocent infant to rescue, and there's also a ticking clock. You've only got 13 hours to cross the labyrinth, so surely this story will connect with audience members. And then, to borrow a page from that cinematic classic, MGM's 1939 version of The Wizard of Oz, Sarah, as she's making her way to Jarrett's castle, home of the Goblin King, would meet three other characters that would then aid her on her journey. And we talked earlier in the show about Ludo the Troll, but there was also a dwarf called Hoggle, and then Sir Didymus, who was an anthropomorphic fox terrier who fancied himself a knight and rode around on the back of an English sheepdog called Ambrosius. And by the way, cinema historians will point out it's like maybe not a good idea to base your movie on the 1939 version of The Wizard of Oz, which I want to say cost MGM $3 million, and they didn't make it back during the initial theatrical release. It was only after it began airing on TV in the 50s that it became the beloved film classic that we know today.
Never connected those dots. Did not realize that this was so closely tied to the Wizard of Oz.
Well, just but that's the thing. You had all these people who loved fantasy films from the classic age of Hollywood, and we're trying to make another one. But again, here's Jim Henson trying to make sure that every possible contingency is covered. So he tries to assemble an A-team to put together Labyrinth. I mean, for example, he hires Terry Jones of Monty Python fame to write the screenplay for Labyrinth. And then he hires Elaine May, who is the screenwriter of Heaven Can Wait and The Birdcage, to then come in and punch up Jones's screenplay. And then figuring, George Lucas, he's had some success with modern age fantasy films. So Henson recruits Lucas to be the executive producer of Labyrinth. Not only that, but George's production company, Lucasfilm, is now riding herd on the overall production. So, supposedly keeping costs down and all that stuff. And then, to give Labyrinth some star power, Lucas brings in David Bowie to play Jareth, the Goblin King. And not only that, but the icing on the cake, so to speak, Jim asked David to write several songs for the score of this fantasy film. So with these pieces in place, it's like, okay, we're guaranteed Labyrinth will not do what Dark Crystal did. It won't be a disappointment. So production begins April of '85. We're up in the UK. Lasts 5 months. But it's like early on, Lauren, there were people going, excuse me. It's just like I can't help but notice that as I look at the script here. It's not really The Wizard of Oz. It's more like Alice in Wonderland, where it's sort of like a bunch of disconnected scenes, rather than something that builds to, an emotionally satisfying climax. But you have to understand, Lauren, that Jim Henson himself is directing Labyrinth, and the dailies, always look great. But Frank Oz, Jim Henson's longtime friend and creative collaborator, once said, and by the way, I'm quoting a wonderful book, Jim Henson. This is the bio that was written by Brian Jones back in December of 2013. Essential reading if you're a Muppet fan. But Mr. Jones has Mr. Oz. He quotes him about Labyrinth, and this is what Frank says. Take a look at Labyrinth and forget the story for a moment. I mean, the images you get are absolutely amazing. That's Jim's production design, and that's what his love was. So it's just staggering, the work there, how this film looks. But as for the film story, it just doesn't hold up. And this, in the end, Lauren, is what seems to have tripped up Labyrinth when it first arrived in theaters in June of '86. That audiences went to theaters, and while they were dazzled by the visuals, they were left kind of cold by the story. And just so you know, back in the day, a lot of the blame for Labyrinth underperforming at the box office was laid at David Bowie's feet. That the feeling was out in Hollywood that Bowie, while he was a mesmerizing performer live on stage in front of an audience, somehow you put him in front of the camera and that charisma just did not come through, that he was kind of cold and lifeless.
Did you think that, though? I mean, I didn't think that.
Well, this is the thing. This is what Hollywood does. It has to be somebody's fault. Why didn't people show up? And so... And this is the thing, poor Jim Henson, after working so hard this time around to make sure that Labyrinth was, in fact, a better movie than Dark Crystal, Jim was devastated when this follow-up made less money at the box office and got worse reviews than Dark Crystal did back in December of '82. And again, once again, quoting from Brian J. Jones's excellent Jim Henson bio about his reaction, his personal reaction to when Labyrinth, what it did at the box office, again, released to theaters in June of '86. And Jim said, "I was stunned and dazed for several months trying to figure out what went wrong, where I went wrong." So again, I told you all that stuff at the top of the show today about how when Disney made its initial attempt to acquire the Jim Henson Company back in the summer of '89, that the mouse was going to get for that $150 million, the whole film library, including Labyrinth. But then, Lauren, Jim Henson dies, May of 1990, and some 7 months later, the Henson family announces that it's calling off talks with the Disney company to acquire the Jim Henson Company, and that's December of 1990. But if we now jump ahead, dear Lord, this is almost 24 years now. February of 2004, this is when the Disney company does finally actually manage to acquire the Muppets, as well as the characters associated with Bear in the Big Blue House. Did Hunter or Lainey ever watch that when they were kids? Or
I don't think so.
Okay, all right. Well, again, early 2000s. They might have not actually been on the planet at that point. But all right. Anyway, what's interesting this time around, Lauren, is that Disney only has to pay $90 million for the Muppets versus $150 million because the Henson family has decided that it's going to hold a few of its IPs back. To be specific, they're hanging on to Fraggle Rock, the Storyteller series, and the films, The Dark Crystal and Labyrinth.
Why?
Well, this is where it gets interesting because over the past 25 years, Dark Crystal and Labyrinth have developed cult followings. And the Henson Company now wants to develop a couple of future projects based on these IPs. Now, for example, Fraggle Rock, that's how we got Fraggle Rock Back to the Rock. That debuted on Apple Television Plus back in January of 2022. In fact, also the most recent holiday special, the first Snow of Fraggle Rock, that debuted on that same streaming service, Apple TV Plus, December of last year, Lauren, 2025. That's also how we got the acclaimed Dark Crystal Age of Resistance. That's a limited series that debuted on Netflix back in August of 2019. Now, mind you, we only got one season, 10 episodes, but wow, what a show. And as for Labyrinth, Henson did first attempt a Labyrinth-like movie. This debuted September of 2005, Mirror Mask. It was directed and designed by Darren McKean and based on a story by Neil Gaiman. But the big news, Lauren, came last year. January of 2025, a sequel to Jim Henson's 1986 cult classic Labyrinth was announced as being in development at TriStar Pictures. And here's the kicker, Lauren. The director is Robert Eggers, the guy who did Nosferatu and The Witch, the Lighthouse film just recently. I mean, this is a Hollywood bigwig. And he's writing and directing the film, and it's not a remake, Lauren. It's a continuation of the original film which, by the way, will be produced by Jim's kids, Lisa Henson and Brian Henson. So, all right.
Okay, Jim, on that note, I think it's time we close up shop for today.
There we go. By the way, folks, if you want to keep up on everything that's happening across the Jim Hill Media Podcast Network, please follow us on social, and don't forget to check out our Patreon for bonus shows and early access.
Yes, and if you have a question or an idea for a future episode, Jim and I absolutely love to hear from you. So Jim can be found at jim@jimhillmedia.com, and I'm at lauren@laurenhersey.com. That does it for today's episode. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on I Want That Too.